Welcome to today's brand origin deep dive into one of the most ubiquitous software products ever created. You've heard of the product, but do you know how a forgotten warehouse accident and a colorblind designer reshaped its global image forever? Sometimes, the most polished brands don't start in sleek labs, but in dusty corners, under immense pressure, with ideas that were nearly thrown away. We're pulling back the curtain on the early, chaotic moments of a brand that defined the personal computer era. If you find value in this kind of storytelling, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps more than you know. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from or what your first memory of this brand was. Let's dive in and discover how it all began. You find yourself in a temperature-controlled corporate archive, the air thick with the scent of old paper and ozone. Dust motes dance in the single beam of light from a high window, illuminating shelves stacked with forgotten prototypes and obsolete hardware. Your fingers trace the spine of a binder labeled Interface Concepts, circa 1983. Inside, among sketches of windows and menus, you discover crude drawings of a peculiar, slightly asymmetrical arrow cursor design, annotated with frantic, crossed-out notes. This is the brand's hidden genesis. Not a clean room birth, but a basement scramble fueled by ambition and uncertainty. This era captures the raw anxiety and relentless iteration of the founders and early developers, wrestling a revolutionary idea into existence while battling internal doubt. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind some of the quickly rejected interface ideas found here. The foundational code was often written in isolation, under immense pressure, with numerous rejected names and concepts littering the path to what would become a global phenomenon. This unsettlingly crude early cursor design, first appearing here as a physical sketch, foreshadows a fundamental instability baked into the very first lines of code and the personal toll this creative pressure took. Building on those raw command line experiments, the focus shifts beneath the blue and gray glow of early screens. This wasn't a simple upgrade. It was a painful, iterative transformation. You witness the corporate organism grappling with a fundamental question. How do you communicate abstract computing concepts to a world that barely knows how to type? Step into cramped labs filled with the persistent hum of old hard drives. On clunky, ancient machines, you see the first attempts at a graphical interface. The rough edges are visible on the low-resolution pixel grid of vintage monitors. Your fingers feel the distinct, tactile clack of early keyboards as engineers and designers wrestle with the impossible task of bridging worlds. This phase marks a major turning point, the all-consuming effort to build a visual shell over pure logic. It's here you feel the lag, the slow redraws, the sheer difficulty in making something as simple as a window feel intuitive. A stark contrast to today's seamless interfaces. Internal design debates rage. Functionality versus aesthetics. The clash between code-centric practicality and visual aspiration was immense. Brand historians still debate whether the immense creative burnout stemmed more from technical hurdles or the relentless, often absurd, internal battles over color palettes and icon design. Legend has it one early icon set was discarded entirely because senior management disliked the specific shade of virtual beige. Countless versions were trashed, a quirky testament to the struggle for a visual identity. Frustration is palpable, leading to significant creative burnout among the design teams. And there it is, reappearing on screen, the crude early cursor motif, still slightly off-kilter, a visual symbol of this experimental, unfinished phase. It's a stark reminder that this new graphical shell, for all its promise, could never fully mask the inherent complexity lurking beneath, hinting at instability down the line. Building on what came before, you witness the brand stepping onto a larger stage, only to find the spotlight already occupied. This is where the immense competitive pressure truly hits, particularly from established players casting long shadows, echoes perhaps from a certain orchard. Internal memos from this era, now brittle with age in the archives, betray a palpable sense of fear. Whispers of corporate espionage and a frantic pace. You can almost hear the tense, clipped recordings of boardroom meetings discussing rival announcements, driving panicked, defensive strategic pivots. This pressure culminated in a major turning point, a desperate, hurried attempt to match a competitor's defining feature. Think of it as trying to replicate a perfectly aged cheese recipe in a microwave. The feature was integrated quickly, clunkily executed, and ultimately became a poorly performing function that would plague user experience and cause significant headaches down the line. Brand historians still debate whether this reactive scramble was a necessary evil or a fatal compromise of their core identity. The visual decay of rival promotional materials found stuffed in forgotten corners of the building offers a stark, silent testimony to the era's anxieties. The early, crude cursor motif, once a symbol of nascent innovation, is seen mocked in unearthed competitor analysis documents, forcing its hurried redesign under external duress. The brand's identity became reactive, almost paranoid, constantly looking over its shoulder, leading to internal compromises that foreshadowed hidden vulnerabilities and laid the groundwork for future public relations disasters. Building on what came before, where the brand felt unstoppable, you now witness a starkly different reality. This is Section 4, the glitch in the system. Suddenly, the hidden struggles weren't hidden anymore. They burst into public view, defining an era of notorious bugs, system crashes, and the dreaded digital symbol of failure, the blue screen of death. You sift through archives filled with stacks of customer complaint letters, their frustration palpable even decades later. Internal bug reports, once tucked away, are now marked critical, but tragically left unresolved, hinting at internal paralysis. Transcripts capture the weary tones of support calls, echoing the sheer tactile frustration of software that simply freezes or refuses to work. The mouse pointer frozen on screen like a digital statue. The soundscape shifts, too. The grating whine of dial-up modems connecting gives way to the jarring, specific sound effect of an error pop-up, a sonic signature of failure. This period marks a major historical turning point, the widespread, embarrassing fallout from fundamental architectural flaws, much like the real-world struggles with early plug-and-play systems that promised ease but delivered nightmares. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind prioritizing speed to market over stability during this critical phase. As the brand's interfaces became synonymous with crashing, the early cursor motif, once a symbol of interaction and control, now frequently appears corrupted or frozen on error screens in archival video footage, symbolizing the loss of control and the interface's failure to maintain stability. You even find a particularly bitter letter detailing how a customer lost weeks of work due to a recurring specific error code. A quirky, lesser-known detail is that this bug's internal codename was Project Paperweight, because it rendered machines about as useful. This wasn't just technical failure. It was an identity crisis as the brand shifted in public perception from innovation to perceived unreliability, facing widespread frustration and mockery. Foreshadowing hangs in the air. The immense hidden cost of patching these fundamental flaws will become clearer, alongside the growing internal dissent about the path forward. Welcome to today's Brand Origin Deep Dive. You've heard of the product. It's likely embedded in your daily life. But do you know how a relentless focus on standardization and a series of high-stakes legal battles shaped its global image forever? We're not just looking at logos or ad campaigns. We're peeling back the layers on the decisions, the people, and the market forces that forged a digital titan. If you find value in this kind of storytelling, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps more than you know. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from or what you think of this brand's incredible journey so far. Let's dive in and discover how it all began. Following the initial spark, the brand took its first bold step, not with a revolution, but with accessibility. The major historical milestone here is arguably the release of its first widely adopted consumer product, something that translated complex technology into a simple, understandable interface. Imagine a world where computing felt like rocket science. This product aimed to make it feel more like sorting mail. You witness early prototypes, clunky perhaps, but hinting at the user-friendliness to come. A quirky, lesser-known detail from this era. The initial marketing budget was so tight, one of the founders famously bartered programming hours for office furniture, including a particularly garish green sofa that became an unofficial meeting point. Brand historians still debate whether this early focus on ease of use was a genuine mission or a clever way to capture a nascent market before competitors could react. This phase is the transition from basement project to budding business, laying the groundwork for everything that follows. Building on that initial traction, the brand enters a phase of rapid expansion. This period is marked by fierce competition and the need to innovate at breakneck speed. The major historical milestone becomes its first truly dominant software application, one that fundamentally changed how businesses operated. You see developers working late nights, fueled by pizza and belief, refining lines of code that would power offices worldwide. A quirky detail involves an early internal bet among engineers about which feature would be most used. The winner received bragging rights and a lifetime supply of their favorite obscure soda. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind a key strategic acquisition made during this time. While expensive, it seemed less about talent and more about instantly eliminating a rising competitor. This chapter is about proving the brand's staying power, navigating treacherous market waters, and establishing itself as a force to be reckoned with, setting the stage for even bigger battles. As explored in the previous phase, success brought increasing scrutiny. The brand now confronts its first significant crisis, often triggered by perceived arrogance or missteps stemming from its growing power. The major historical milestone could be a major public relations disaster, or perhaps a critical product failure that exposed underlying vulnerabilities. You witness the internal panic, the rushed meetings, the frantic attempts to control the narrative. A quirky detail reveals that during this crisis, a key executive kept a literal bad news jar on their desk, dropping in a marble for every negative press mention, which quickly overflowed. Brand strategists still debate if the handling of this crisis was a masterclass in damage control or merely a demonstration of the brand's sheer market weight overpowering its mistakes. This is where the polish starts to chip, revealing the human element behind the corporate facade and forcing a reevaluation of identity. Now, the narrative addresses the period of immense market dominance and the subsequent antitrust challenges. You examine legal documents, leaked internal communications regarding competition strategy, and testimonials from smaller companies feeling crushed. The major historical milestone is undoubtedly the filing of the landmark antitrust lawsuit against the brand, a turning point that would define its public image for a generation. A quirky, lesser-known detail unearthed during discovery involved an internal email chain where engineers discussed adding a deliberately obscure error message specifically designed to discourage users from trying a competitor's product. Brand historians still debate whether the controversial business tactic of bundling core software was innovation or anti-competitive behavior designed to eliminate rivals. You witness the sterile silence of courtroom transcripts, the oppressive weight of thick legal binders, and the visual representation of market share charts dominating internal reports. The emotional shift is the brand's identity transforming from a scrappy innovator to a perceived corporate titan, grappling with the public perception of being a monopoly and the ethical questions raised by its own success. The crude early cursor motif is seen miniaturized and standardized across a vast, undifferentiated product line, representing the homogenization and loss of individual identity under the weight of market control. Foreshadowing points towards the internal toll of the legal battles and the seeds of future shifts away from a purely desktop-centric identity. Following the intense period of legal battles and public scrutiny, the brand enters a new era, forced to adapt and evolve. The antitrust rulings, while perhaps not breaking the company apart, fundamentally altered its trajectory and strategic approach. The major historical milestone here could be the brand's first significant foray into a new, non-desktop market, perhaps the internet or mobile, spurred partly by external pressure and partly by recognizing shifting trends. You see the cautious, sometimes awkward steps into uncharted territory, a contrast to its earlier confident strides in its established domain. A quirky detail: early internal memos about this new market reveal a surprising level of skepticism and resistance from veterans comfortable in the old ways. One project was even nicknamed the boondoggle internally. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind some of the early, failed product attempts in this new space. Were they genuine attempts to innovate, or just defensive maneuvers? This phase is about shedding the skin of the perceived monopoly, navigating a more complex, connected world, and dealing with the lingering effects of its past dominance while searching for relevance in the future. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive into the brand's origin and evolution. We've traveled from humble beginnings and scrappy innovation to market dominance, legal battles, and forced adaptation. The key takeaways? Success often brings its own set of challenges, that public perception is a powerful force, and that even the biggest titans must constantly evolve or risk becoming obsolete. The long-term brand legacy is complex, a mix of undeniable technological impact and enduring questions about power, competition, and ethics. The cultural symbolism of this brand continues to shift. Once representing the cutting edge of personal computing, it now embodies different things to different people, depending on their experience with its vast ecosystem. The lessons learned aren't just for corporations. They're about the life cycle of ideas, the double-edged sword of power, and the constant need for introspection and change. And maybe, just maybe, the soul of a brand is never in its product, but in the people, stories, and stumbles that shape it. Building on what came before, you arrive at the present day. Windows exists not just as an operating system, but as a vast, interconnected ecosystem. The strategic pivots driven by past failures, particularly the hard lessons learned from the difficulty penetrating mobile markets, pushed the brand decisively towards cloud computing and services. You witness the continuous reinvention of the interface. Each new iteration, like Windows 11, layering smooth, impersonal design over the blocky textures and rough edges of yesteryear. The silent hum of distant server farms powering features like OneDrive and Azure is the new soundtrack, a stark contrast to the whirring fans of old towers. This is a brand that feels ubiquitous, woven into the fabric of digital life, yet perhaps less emotionally resonant than the clunky, characterful machines of the past. Analysts continue to question the reasoning behind some major shifts, debating whether the relentless push for integration sometimes compromises user choice. Yet a surprising echo of the past lingers. A deep dive into early UI design documents, perhaps an obscure talk from a retired engineer, might reveal a reference to the initial, crude cursor, a faint, almost subliminal element in modern design guidelines, a reminder that beneath the polished surface, the ghost of that uncertain beginning still moves. The shift to Windows as a service, a major turning point from the traditional boxed software model, marked the final transformation. And so, the journey through Windows history concludes. You reflect on the long shadow cast by this digital titan, a brand that fundamentally reshaped the way we interact with technology. Its legacy is complex, marked by innovation, triumph, and undeniable stumbles. It symbolizes the relentless march of progress, often leaving behind those who can't keep pace, whether due to cost, access, or the sheer speed of change. The lessons learned from its turbulent past, from the interface wars to the mobile defeat, are etched into its current form, informing everything from cloud strategy to design philosophy. Was the mystery of its identity, that blend of corporate ambition and chaotic evolution, ever truly resolved? Or is it simply waiting, dormant in the code, for the next iteration to reveal new, hidden layers? This digital ghost in the machine, born from an awkward arrow and boundless ambition, persists. And maybe, just maybe, the soul of a brand is never in its product, but in the people, stories, and stumbles that shape it.